Hello and welcome once again to the channel. Now today I want to do a comparison between my standard Nikon Z6 Mark II camera and my hydrogen alpha modified Nikon Z6 Mark II. Now this is something a lot of you have been asking about, and I want to give you some real world results. Now I'm not too interested in test charts or mathematical graphs showing the theory behind the modification. That isn't of any great interest to me. What I want to explore is simply this: is it worth doing? And will I get better results in my Astro landscape photography if I do the mod to my camera? Now, before we get started, we have to understand that the reason we would do a H-alpha mod to our camera is so that we can capture a lot more of the hydrogen alpha color up there in the night sky. And there's a lot of it up there. Lots of beautiful pinks and reds can be seen by the camera after we do the modification. Now, a standard camera has a filter that really only enables it to see the same visible range of light that our eyes can see. So this camera that I have here has been modified to see all of that, but also a lot more of the red channel. It's as simple as that. So in this video, I'll be shooting these two cameras side by side to capture the exact same composition with the same settings. And then I'll go to the computer and see what we can do in editing with those images and compare the results as we go along. So the other night I ventured out at about 3 a.m. to capture the Milky Way galactic core as it was rising in the eastern sky. For this test, I decided to keep it really simple and only shoot single exposures. My intention was to take images of subjects that I'd shot in the past to make it a bit easier on myself to get a variety of different subject matter. I would also be doing some simple light painting to show how this modification would affect that process as well. Now, I am well aware that there are parts of the night sky that display a lot more of the hydrogen alpha color as compared to the galactic core. But my reasoning was that the Milky Way core is by far the most photographed section of the night sky for the majority of people. And because of that, this test would make sense to a lot of us. So off I went. It was a slightly blustery night, but the stars were shining brightly overhead. And I was keen to make sure I had a very similar composition on both cameras. And to achieve this, they had to be positioned very close to each other. Now, it actually takes a lot longer than you may think to set up the double tripods and mount the cameras and lenses. Oh, and speaking of lenses, I was using the 20mm focal length, but I only have one of the Nikon 20mm f1.8 lenses. So for one of my cameras, I used the Sony 20mm f1.8 fitted to my Nikon via the Megadap adapter. This worked okay, but I think I did notice a distinct quality advantage in the corners of the frame from the Nikon lens. Now, to try to balance out the comparison, I placed the Sony lens on my hydrogen alpha modified camera. So it was a long night out there and quite tiring by the end of it. But I was really happy with the results on the back of the camera screens. You could tell straight away how different they looked on camera. The brighter image from the modified camera, as well as the pink and purple hues, were immediately obvious. And by contrast, the standard camera looked decidedly green by comparison. Before I left for home, I got the Star Tracker out and shot a few frames from both cameras to compare these. Now, the thing that really stood out to me was how much brighter the modified camera was. There's no doubt that whatever they do to modify the camera, it increases the light gathering power to the sensor. And this can only be a good thing, I think, for astrophotographers. All right, so let's get onto the computer and take a look at the end results. So the first thing I want to show you here in Lightroom, I'm in the library module at the moment, and immediately you can tell which images relate to which camera. You can see that the definite green tones of the standard camera and the definite pink and sort of purpley colored tones of the Astro modified camera. So that helps me to identify which one is which. So the other thing I want to do here is just compare some images. So what I'm going to do is select these two, which are exactly the same image, just taken with two different cameras, and I'm going to go into the compare mode, and you can see there the image on the left is a standard camera, image on the right is a modified. It is a much brighter image. The light painting is exactly the same. You can see there that the image itself is the same image. It's exactly the same. You can see those satellites there in the side view of the silo there. So this is exactly the same image, and yet it looks so much brighter on the right hand side. This highlights what I said earlier about the Astro modification adding a level of brightness to the image. Now, I have not edited these images at all. What I have done is actually added to, because one of the lenses was a Sony mount, then it didn't come with built-in profile correction. So what I've done there in these Astro modified pictures, all I've done is enabled the profile corrections and selected the Nikon 20mm profile. So that's all I've done. I'm going to do some editing and I'll show you the edited results. But let's have a look at a couple more just to compare. And once again, these are going to be unedited straight off the camera. This is exactly how the camera would see these images. View, compare. Once again, we can see the image on the right hand side is much more vivid and bright. You can see it in the foreground here. Definitely a lot more detail in that foreground. Have a look at that. Now I wonder if this relates to noise as well. So that's something we'll have a look at as we go through. And I'm going to show you some edited pictures a bit later on, but I think at this point in time you can see what I'm talking about. That is just so much more detail in there. So what I'm going to do is do a little bit of really brief editing and show you what that's going to look like. All right, so I've just done some really basic edits here in Lightroom. You can see here, this is the first image I shot of the little silo with the standard camera. I've added some exposure, a little bit of whites, also some noise reduction here, plus luminance, contrast, color, all lens profile corrections. A slight adjustment to the white balance, but not much. And if you look at this image full screen, that's not too bad. I mean, you know, for a single shot, I could certainly do a lot more with the edit, but I'm not going to at this moment because that's more advanced. But what we're going to do now is have a look at the other one. So this is the Astro modded. Now I've done some similar adjustments, but it didn't need as much exposure because it was already brighter. Same noise reduction. Not much else. I have also adjusted the white balance. You can see the before and after here. So I've tried to add a little bit more. I've taken away some of that pink and magenta, but that's only a very slight amount. And we can see the full screen there. So that doesn't look too bad. There's certainly a lot more that could be brought out of that image, but I'm not going to do that right now. But I will show you the comparison side by side, just so you can see this properly. And there we have it. We've got the two images side by side. And I have added exposure quite a bit to this image in both the foreground and the sky, and but it's still not as bright as this one. But anyway, you can see very dramatically the difference in the color. Now, if I was going to edit these pictures, I would take this further with the edit here. I'd go into Photoshop and I'd do all sorts of things there, and I will probably do that later, and I'll show you the images at the end of this video. Anyway, let's go and have a look at some more images. So the next one I worked on was this tree, and you can see that there I've just done a little bit of the similar adjustments on that tree, and there's the modified camera. So if we look at this one, let me just go into the develop full screen. So that looks pretty good, doesn't it? That's just some really minor adjustments on that image. Let's have a look at the standard camera full screen, and that also looks pretty good, but definitely different colors. So it's all a matter of working out what our taste is, I guess. Let's look at these and compare the two. So there you go. Standard camera on the left, Astro modified camera on the right. And it's definitely that pink magenta color that you can see. Let's have a look in the detail a little bit here. Definitely brighter, as I said, but apart from that, every other setting on the camera was exactly the same. So the noise and everything else should be identical. And I think it is, just looking at this image. Looks good though. Okay. Let's go and have a look at another one. This is one I shot a bit further down the track. Same little bit of editing, slight different white balance settings, a little bit of exposure, hardly anything else here. This is the standard camera. Noise reduction, let's have a look at it full screen. So I lit this with a little LED panel on the left, which was the wrong color temperature. It's got this sort of a funny color, which I'm not happy with, and it doesn't look too bad here, but in the other image it looks worse in this one, I think. But anyway, let's have a look at it. And there you can see what that one looks like. Again, you have to realize that these images are hardly edited at all. There's only very slight edits done, and I would do a lot more than this. So let's compare these two side by side. And there you go. There's another comparison that you can see clearly the different tone between the left image and the right image. So I chose this portion of the sky because it's not overly covered with hydrogen alpha targets. It does have some, and you'll see them. There's one there, a little bit there, and up here you can see a little bit in here. There are a few areas in the Milky Way galactic core, a few more down the bottom here which you cannot see there, but overall they're both good images. I've got some more which I will show you, but I think what I might do is just do some more edits on these images and come back to you and show you what can be extracted from these files. Now I've selected a few of these images and I've gone through and done a full edit. Now remember, these are all single exposures, and if you want to know how I edit my single exposure images, refer back to last week's video where I go through it all the way from start to finish. And I want you to know that I've processed all of these images I'm about to show you exactly the same way. So let's look at this first image. This is the original very basic edit I did in Lightroom, and here after I've done my full edit, this is what it looks like. And we'll go full screen on that, and you can see that looks pretty dynamic. Now remember, this is a unmodified camera, single exposure. Now just to show you what the modified camera looks like, that's it there. Now they are slightly different coloring. I'll compare the two of them together in a moment, but you can see they're both very dynamic. So let's compare the two of them, because that's the best way we're going to get our mind right about this. And there you have it. They both look really, really good. And what I did when I'm editing both of these images, I'm trying to actually bring them fairly close to a similar look. And I think you can see I've pretty much accomplished that, I think. So you can see here, we zoom right in, you can see that hydrogen alpha showing a bit more on the image on the right, because that is a hydrogen alpha camera. Same here, you can see a little bit more than that one. Let me just zoom out a fraction. It's a bit easier to see. Yeah, so it's definitely a little bit more, obviously, on the one on the right, but this is probably not the best image to highlight that properly. So let's have a look at our next example. All right, so this is the next one. Now, this is showing a view of this old silo complex with the Milky Way rising over the top. Now, this is the image out of Lightroom with hardly any edits on it. Very, very close to the original image. A little bit of light painting on the sides, both sides. So I ran around like a headless chook trying to get that right. But it is still just a single exposure. So this is the unmodified standard camera, and this is after my full edit. So you can see there's quite a lot of dynamics in that. Let's go full screen. Not too bad, is it? Very pleased with that edit. Now I want you to know, and I will reiterate this, these are all edited with the exact same editing techniques, whether they're modified or unmodified. I've used exactly the same techniques. And here we have the modified camera. You can see that's the unedited version, and here is the edited version. And once again, this is absolutely dynamic. I love this image. Now you can really highlight those hydrogen alpha little emissions here. In fact, all the way through here, there's a fair bit out here and up through here as well. But this image is absolutely beautiful. So let's have a look at these two together. So they're both good. See, it's only until you see them side by side that you actually do see the differences. Now, I have pushed this image over here on the left quite hard to get the result of that. And you can see there's a lot more color in this image on the right-hand side because that's the H-alpha camera. So it sees more of that red and pink and magentas. Now, you can edit as much as you like to try and get it to come out, but it's a lot easier when it's already captured there in the first place. However, they both look pretty good, don't they? It's exactly the same composition, exactly the same lighting. And this is one thing I want to draw your attention to, the lighting. A lot of people ask me about that. I used my standard torch with the half CTO gel over the top, and I think the lighting on both the foregrounds looks pretty much the same as far as color is concerned, because that can be a big part of the editing. Now, originally, they weren't anything like that. I had to get the edit to make them come out that way, but I'm very happy with that. So there is that one. Let's go on to the next example. Okay, so what I want to show you now is a single tracked image. Now this is the standard camera, a 60-second shutter speed at f2.2, 20mm focal length at ISO 800. That's what it looks like without any editing, straight out of camera. It's okay. Nothing startling, but that's what it looks like. And this is what it looks like after doing my edits. And once again, that's a dynamic image. That is beautiful. Zodiacal light here. It looks fantastic. Fair bit of color. I had to work hard to get that color on it, but that's what it looks like. Let's have a look at the modified camera now. And this is the standard picture, pretty much straight out of camera. Remember, I'm using a Sony lens on this. And here we go. This is what it looks like after the editing. And there we go. The green in the sky in these images, by the way, is natural air glow. It is there in the sky. And it is present in both of these shots. So let's compare the two side by side. And there we go. Now, it's quite interesting because the image on the left probably has a little bit more of that sort of reddy magenta glow here. And that's because I was trying to edit that in to the image. Whereas the image on the right-hand side, I didn't have to do that because it's already there. And therefore, you're seeing a bit more of the natural color of the sky, which I like. But they're both pretty good. Let's just zoom in a fraction and I'll show you what they look like closer up. You can see this little bit of hydrogen alpha here. And again, up a bit higher. Where are we? Just here and here. On this side, this is the modified camera. Far less of it on this camera, which you would imagine to be the case because that's our standard camera. But other than that, they're both pretty good edits. They're both exactly the same style of edit, and they both look okay. So let's move on to our next image. Now, towards the end of the night, it was actually starting to get a little bit twilighty, and you can see the sky glowing there. Now, this is a standard camera, almost straight out of the camera, just a little bit of adjustment with the brightness levels, etc. But after I did the edit, this is what it looks like. And that's not a bad image. It's pretty good. Pretty good. Remember, this is a standard camera. So now let's go and have a look at the modified version. So this is what it looks like straight out of camera. Immediately you can see there's more pink, more magenta in the sky, which is what you do get in an early morning pre-dawn sky. And let's have a look at the edited version of this one. Have a look at that. A lot of detail in that Milky Way. A lot of detail and gorgeous gradient in that sky. Zodiacal light, remember, that's right through where this tree is located. So let's compare these two now, side by side. And here we have the comparison side by side. And you can see the difference. There's a lot more blue in this image, a lot more magenta in this image. Now, obviously, I could probably edit this image to look a bit more blue, and I could probably edit that image to look a little bit more magenta-ish. But it just gives us an idea of how they look. We'll just zoom in a bit on that tree. You can see the same car going through the shot. The detail there in the foreground. Then we go up to the sky. You can see those same satellites crisscrossing through above those trees. And there we go up into the sky in the Milky Way. Both very good. Yeah, I like them both. I think they're great. So I think you can see from looking at these examples that a lot of it does come down to the editing. And as I mentioned earlier, my editing video does go through that in quite a detailed step-by-step manner. And I think it's important. We have to work very hard on our post-processing of any image, but especially with a modified camera, because your camera colors are going to come out differently. And I think it's important. Now, I do set my white balance in camera. It's something I've always done. I don't leave it to auto. I don't set it to daylight or anything like that. And you'll see that I do that in the video that I mentioned earlier. But all in all, I think all of these images are fantastic. And I think it proves that you can get a great image out of a standard camera. You can also get a great image out of a modified camera, but it comes down to the person pressing that button and knowing what you're going to be doing with these images in the edit, because I think that's where the rubber really does hit the road. And I've said it many times before, with Nightscape and landscape astrophotography, editing is certainly 50% at least of the scenario to get a final image. So the big question, would I advise anyone to get a hydrogen alpha modified camera? Well, it certainly depends on a few factors. One, do you want to spend a lot of time in post-processing to get the colors right? Two, are you shooting areas of the sky that have a lot of hydrogen alpha? Because if you're not, then it's just a lot of work to go through for a lesser benefit. But if you're going to be shooting portions of the sky with a lot of hydrogen alpha, for example, the Orion area or parts of the southern area of the southern hemisphere, around the Southern Cross and Eta Carina and various places like that, the Gum Nebula, full of red emissions. And so if you want to capture that in all its glory, then a hydrogen alpha modified camera is certainly the way to go. So there you have it. I love using my hydrogen alpha modified camera, and I think you can see why by the results here. But it's not without its challenges, particularly regarding lighting foregrounds. Anyway, I'd be keen to read your comments down below this video, and I'd love you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. But in the meantime, have a fantastic week, and I'll see you guys in the next video.